Hello and welcome to our panel today. My name is Leonie Weigner. I am a journalist working for the business arm of the German news agency dpa. And today, for the next 45 minutes, we will deal with the subjects between banks and fintechs, their relationship, their cooperation, and their partnership. And we want to find an answer of the question where these two parties stand right now after COVID-19, and of course looking forward where the development might go. For answering these questions, I am luckily not alone here on stage. I have a guest, and three more guests are via video call online, and I want to introduce you to my panelists now. First of all, welcome to Katharina Lueth. She is Vice President of Raisin, and she is responsible for the international scaling of the Raisin platforms outside of Germany. And in addition, she is responsible for Raisin's growth in the English market.
Everyone.
Hi, sorry. Katharina. Hi, sorry. Second, let me introduce you to Thorsten. He has worked as an economic developer for various foreign governments, including the SAR, Hong Kong government, and therefore he is especially familiar with the challenges of fintechs expanding internationally. Thank you for being here. The third panelist is Tobias Ahrens. He's leading the two founder centers of the Berlin Volksbank. With his teams, he supports, finances, advises fintechs, founders, startups in building their business, and the focus of these founder centers is, of course, Berlin and Brandenburg. And last but not least, let me introduce you to Aria Widyanto. He's based in Jakarta, Indonesia. He's running Amata. This is a fintech with almost 1 million customers who are all women. And Amata's focus is on providing women-only customers who are unbanked and mostly living in rural villages. So it's quite special, but we will talk about it, and I think he will give us a good insight. We will soon start with a pretty classical Q&A session, but of course at the end there will be room for your questions as well. But before we start, I want you four to give me a short feeling of how you see the situation right now. So I will give you some statements or questions, and you please give me a thumb up or down if you agree, disagree, or if you can relate. Okay, so first statement is banks need fintechs. Yes or no? What do you think? Yes. Tobias is not sure that much, but the other three say yes. Vice versa, fintechs need banks. Yes?
Yes.
Up, all four, okay. And now please give me a sign if you think that COVID-19, that through this pandemic, banks and fintechs now work more or less together. More?
It depends.
It depends.
What also, I'm kind of
difficult. Okay.
Divided.
And do they work better or worse together?
Same as before.
When they work together, they work
better. Okay, thank you so much. I have a few more, but let's stop it here. I want to start with you, Tobias. Your founder centers are connected to the Berlin Volksbank, which belongs as a cooperative bank to the, if I may say so, to the more traditional banking sector in Germany, right? So can you tell us a bit about the partnership so we can imagine why it makes sense for a startup to come to this bank in order to build their business?
Yeah. So thank you, first of all, for having me here. And let's start with your question. On the topic of today, our company has so far very much been involved with fintech. And therefore, we have our perspective. I would like to think about our headline, where we say, what one cannot do, all the others can do together. And this is something which is unique with the Volksbank in Germany, because they used to work together with different partners, because we have a regional organization. And so we are used to it. We work together with partners also from the traditional scene. And so it's pretty easy for us to adapt the new ones and to step together with the Fintechs, for example. And therefore, we have different approaches. So first of all, just to name a few, we work together with Weigner, which is now a company of Berliner Volksbank, which is a pre-financing for invoices, a Fintech, and now we included it even to Berliner Volksbank. So this is the next step of working together. On the other hand, we have our arm of VC, and we therefore invested, for example, in Penta and Banksware. And so you can see we as a traditional, as you said, traditional, very old-fashioned bank are very up to the new dynamics on the market. And we are really looking forward to work closer together where, if there is a fit, and this is something we should discuss later on, in my opinion, because sometimes it's like everybody's pushing into the market, but not really solving a problem. And so first of all comes, if there is a need from the customer, which is solved better from somebody else, why shouldn't we go together? And so this is the assumption. I hope it fits to your question as good as possible.
All right, thank you for the insight so far. Just a question in addition. Do the Fintechs have to work together with the Berlin Volksbank, or can they just go after they build it up in your Founder Center?
Oh, it depends. So the Founder Center is something different. This was the whole approach for the company. Within the GründerCenter, which I'm leading, we are taking care of the companies on the financial side. So first of all, we give them an account, for example, give them the extra services which are already mentioned, for example, pre-financing of invoices, and we give them loans. This is something very special because most of the other banks are not giving loans to founders within the first 3 years or 2 years. And we are ready to give them loans from the beginning on, business plan based. And so as you can see, it's not like the traditional financing. We are mainly focused on business plan and on the future potential of the company in my department. And so far, I've not come across a fintech approach that promises a successful approach in this case. And so if somebody's around here who can solve this problem, I would be very happy to get an impulse from the audience.
Okay, thank you. Probably we will find someone. Now let's switch
Let's talk.
Yeah. Now let's switch to Aria. You're working for Armata. The Fintech has developed apps, or one app, I'm not quite sure right now, but these apps help female micro-entrepreneurs who are on a lower educational level and have a lower income in order to get them access to digitalize their business. I hope I understood it right. And the interesting thing is that now banks turn to you, to Armata, because they want to access the market. So so you're the baseline, and now the banks are coming. Do you see Armata as a door opener, or do you want to run the business together with the banks?
Thank you. Yes, now we develop or position ourselves as the door opener, because Armata as a startup, we have a mission to improve the financial inclusion in Indonesia. As you know, even today in 2021, there are more than 40% of Indonesian populations still have no access whatsoever to banking infrastructures, whether it be savings or a loan for productive purposes. So Amarta's goal is to become the door opener. So we plan and we do open up access to those who are unbanked. And that's where our strategic positions become the partner of banking. Currently, we partner with top-tier banks in Indonesia, like the state-owned or private banks, and also the banks who are operating in regional or rural areas. As we know, those regional banks and rural banks, they do have very limited budget to develop their infrastructures, their technology, and their branch networks. And that's where the needs comes. They need to be able to reach out to more customers, but despite the limitations that they do have, they need somebody else to do on their behalf. And that's where we come in. We develop a very simple apps that can be used by a population, especially in rural villages and especially women, so that they could use our applications, which is very simple and tailored to their needs, to get access for productive loans, which is supported by the banks. So the banks will act as our channeling partners. We channel the money from the banks, and then we distribute, we manage the money on the front end to our customers. And in addition to that, because the digital literacy is also still relatively low in Indonesia, especially in rural areas, we also deploy field agents. Last year, we conducted a research with the World Bank that to accelerate the digital transformations in Indonesia, we need facilitators like field agents, and that's how we provide. So Amarta also has field officers on the ground to train these women in rural villages on how to use our applications. So gradually, we will shift them into a digital environment, but in the meantime, we also are able to onboard offline customers as well. So that's how we are doing at the moment with the banks.
Yeah, but is it something you aimed at when you started with Amarta? I think it was founded 2010, if I'm right. Is it something you aimed, or what you expected or wished for, or was it something which came by surprise that the banks want to work together with you?
It didn't come by surprise, but you're right that Amarta evolves through time. So we started ourselves as a conventional microfinance back in 2010, but 4 or 5 years later, in 2015, we see that we could scale up better and faster and more efficient by building a technology platform. And that's how the ideas of financial technology came into the scene, and that's how we started to rebrand ourselves as a financial technology. And before we transform or we pivot ourselves into a fintech platform, actually there is no bank interested to partner with us. But after we pivot, after we transform ourselves as a financial technology with more agility, more ability to reach out to frontier market that or segments that banks cannot reach out by themselves, then those banks started to talk to us and explore the possibilities of working together.
All right, thank you so much. Before we go on, I have a few more statements for you four, and I'm interested in your opinion again. So, or at least in your stage. So, have you worked for a bank already? Yes, all four yes. Have you worked for a fintech? 1, 2, 3. You two not, okay. And have you already worked in another country than the one you are now working in? Yes, all four. No, Tobias. And last but not least, is Germany a good environment to build up a fintech business? Okay.
The one who does it.
Okay, we have to talk about it, this Katharina. But first, Thorsten, you, as far as you have worked for several governments already. In Germany, you say the environment is pretty good, but the German financial sector has a strong regulation. Their authorities are pretty tough, I would say. So it might be hard to get into a partnership between banks and fintechs. But you say the environment is good, so how would you evaluate the market?
Well, I think you have to obviously differentiate between the three different models. I think the the platform banking, where banks integrate some clever fintech tools, like for example the robo-advisor Robin for Deutsche Bank, and then also the banking as a service, so the white label banking, where you've got really the end-to-end experience, and where non-banks are enabled to provide a payment loan facility and all the different services without ever touching money, right? And then you have the open banking, where you've got access to the customer data, and let's say a third-party provider would provide some cool tool to pull in all your and individual customers in the bank accounts to look at the account situation and compare and better plan do the financial planning. So I think in what I'm seeing is a lot of very interesting movements, let's say, in this banking as a service space. Recently, Starling Bank from UK announced, rather than being yet another neobank in Germany competing with N26 and so on, they want to enter the German market, and they will do that. And they are well equipped financially and also with their banking background. But rather than becoming another bank, they will provide this banking as a service white label solution, which I think is highly interesting. And it kind of makes the picture maybe more confusing, rather than having this contradiction, banks versus fintechs. You now have also non-banks entering the fray, and that's highly interesting. On the other hand, you see, of course, examples like take Santander, when they gave up their PayPal equivalent, I think it was called PayGo. So they lost a lot of money doing something not so well that PayPal and others are doing much better. And I suppose the question is really, the big question is, who owns the customer? And of course, if you do this, integrating a clever fintech solution as a bank, you can use your cloud as an incumbent with your client base, and that is there to stay, I'm sure. But of course, it means revenue sharing, so you're potentially losing money, and it's the question if that is a sustainable model. On the other hand, fintechs, of course, I think I was very much thumbs up that they definitely need the banks. And if you look at many of the fintechs in Frankfurt, for example, that are very much kind of geared to serving the existing incumbent players, because it's just that much easier. But it's not so easy to get seen, right? It's not so easy to get in. That's why people like Frankfurt, Accelerator Frankfurt, are doing a great job to kind of line up the good candidates and do a lot of, pre-pairing and pre-selection.
Yeah. Well, you were a thumbs up, but Katharina, you're not so sure about the German environment for fintechs. Can you tell us a bit about your experiences?
So I would say that's why I said it's not thumbs down either, but I think there's sort of two key challenges. One, indeed, I don't think it's necessarily bad that Germany is heavily regulated, but it's sometimes quite slow. And I think this is not just in terms of financial regulation, but also when it comes to other bureaucratic processes. There is countries that are quite a bit faster, which make life easier. And I think the second thing that is not necessarily something that Germany alone can change is market size. So theoretically, we have a single European market, but in practice, we really don't. And then when you put a market like Germany and sort of in brackets EU against the US, then you just have other markets where if you found a new company, you have access to a far larger market in an easier fashion, because in the European Union still, though oftentimes it might be possible with a single license, it's not always the case. And then you tend to have what I like to call harmonized laws and harmonized consumer protection, but harmonized and standardized is unfortunately not the same. So every single country tends to have a bit their own bells and whistles. So a product that you develop for the German market will almost always need some sort of adapting in terms of consumer protection, KYC, etc., in order to be able to roll it out to the entire European Union and really the full market. So that's why I was a bit thumbs in the middle. Yeah. On the other hand, you do, of course, have a lot of stability in a sense, and maybe more predictability than in some other countries. So it's definitely not a bad place either to fintech.
Yeah. I'll come to you soon with your story about expansions going international. Just want to talk to Tobias for a second, because you see different business models every day. And can you relate either to the things Thorsten told us or Katharina? What are the problems which occur the most often when building up a fintech business or working together with banks? Oh, you're muted. Yep.
So
yeah, no.
Thank you. So now I think I'm to here. Yeah, there are several problems, and I would definitely agree what we heard before, especially what Katharina said, that there is something in the process of getting to the market. It's a little bit different here on this side. What I hear from founders, and that they have some bureaucracy hurdles which has to be overrun, and this takes a lot of time. And time is, as you know, as we all know, a very highly good. And so this momentum which other companies can create in other markets is at some point a competitive advantage to them. And this is what I think should be moving forward. But on the other side, it has also something good in it. Because if you start a business here, especially in fintech, it's so highly regulated. And so if you have the possibility to make it here, you can make it anywhere to be in this race. And so this is what I can see, what I hear from customers which are related in this area. And on the other hand, it's always good to have some kind of partnerships here when you go into the market. And this is what really works out here very good, especially in Berlin and Brandenburg. You have a huge network of partners which give you support, which give you the right context, which give you the right information at the right point, so that you can scale up your business model very easily based on the amount of knowledge which is around. And this is something I want to add to this discussion at this point.
Okay. So Katharina, you made it already here with Raisin in Germany, and now you're expanding, and you're responsible for that. So what are your experience? Can you somehow use your knowledge which you earned in Germany, or is it totally new?
No, so I would say it's not totally new. I think that would be that would be horrible if we had to start from scratch everywhere. Ultimately, if I look at our business model, it's one that we have to a large extent exported. But I would say there is two big things that in the end you do need to look at for every single market. One is consumers. So consumers do work different, even when you just look at the EU, right? So the French banking market is completely different to the German one. So Germany in particular, with its very specific structure of the cooperative banks and the savings banks and the private banks, has actually quite a huge number of banks. People have been used to seeing foreign banks such as French banks and Dutch banks, Austrian banks in the market for around 20 years. If you go to a place like France, it's highly national. So there's a couple of banking groups that really dominate the market. So you need to look at what's the structure of the market, how do consumers work. So when we look at Anglo-Saxon markets, people are a lot more what I would call investors rather than the classic German savers. So Germans tend to be savers rather than investors. I see Tobias smiling. I'm sure he has a story or two to tell about that. And the second thing we do indeed look at for every single market is a regulation. So despite the fact that sort of in principle it works similar everywhere, you do need to look at consumer protection everywhere, at licensing. But the good news is indeed once you have the processes in place for a German license, it's typically rather a bit of tweaking to get a license somewhere else rather than starting again from scratch.
Okay. I have another question, but do you need a minute? Or is it, yeah, all right. Okay, we come back to you. Thorsten, you know pretty good when rolling out a fintech in another country or region, whatever. What would you give as tips, or can you share your experiences?
Well, absolutely. It's so fascinating, and maybe I can share that in my time between 2016 and 2019, I was the European Fintech lead for Invest Hong Kong, the Hong Kong government inward investment promotion agency, and we helped companies like Checkout, eBury, Revolut, for example, to set up operations in Hong Kong, in my case. And that was an interesting journey because, of course, it's 10,000 kilometers away from Europe. It's got a different jurisdiction, and in the end, quite interesting. It was the regulation stupid. Most of the successes we had were from the UK, not least because London, that's where we were based, was easy to meet the client, the potential investors, but also the regulatory framework was quite similar. And even Hong Kong followed the UK on the regulatory journey to change the regulation. For example, they introduced an e-money license, they introduced a digital bank license, and then suddenly it opened up opportunities for certain players in certain verticals like payments, for example. So initially, 2015 onwards in Hong Kong, everyone focused on the low-hanging fruit, the payments. There's the great example here from Indonesia, founder named Alex Kong, who made money, made millions in the real estate business, and then pivoted and set up his own fintech. The company is called TNG, the next generation, and it provides easy access to banking services, especially to remittance services for unbanked and underbanked people in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong there are 300,000 plus domestic helpers who loved the guy because he gave them basically a day on their day off on Sunday. They didn't have to queue outside Western Union. They could send the money back through a cool app, and they got some in-app promotions. And this is something that was very scalable and very successful there. And then there's another example, I think, which is interesting, talking about fintechs versus so technology, what are in essence technology companies, and then we have the incumbents that are basically banks because they have a bank license and are very strictly regulated. And then you have these new players that have done rather well. There's Mox Bank, a neobank in Hong Kong, who set up 3 years ago, I think, and they have around 100,000 customers, and now had a change of hands on the CEO side. But that's interesting to see that few players have done rather well to completely reinvent the wheel and restart up a new bank from scratch in a market that's very dense also. I mean, it's super competitive in Hong Kong, right? It's the third largest financial center. And you could ask Dr. Wing Chung here in the room, who is the head of the Berlin office of Invest Hong Kong, my former colleague, about this. But anyway, so I think, and coming back to your essence of your question, I think it was very important for the investors and for the fintechs crossing borders to first of all understand the regulatory framework, to understand their customer, to really be willing and able to also adapt their business model to the local market. And rather than saying, okay, we have a one-size-fits-all approach and this will surely work in a different country. I mean, there were some wonderful successes, also some lessons learned from companies who just couldn't fly in the end.
All right, thank you. Katharina, can you talk again or no? Okay. So I want to follow up with Aria. You somehow come from the other side because you are in Indonesia and you help the banks getting access. So what is necessary for banks to get access, and why do the banks need Amarta?
Right. The primary reasons why banks approach us is because the fact that there are so many people in Indonesia who cannot access banking services. I mean, conventional banking services like the one that we have at the moment. While on the other side, us as a technology company, we are forced to understand the customers better and then to tailor our products according to the needs of our customers. So I would say we could listen to our customers better. That's why we could design the front-end applications or products that fits to their needs. and that's what the bank needs, that they cannot fulfill up until now. And that's why where the opportunity to collaborate pops up, and that's how we are now doing our partnerships with banks. Apparently, these kind of collaborations brings benefit for both sides, because as a financial technology company operating as a peer-to-peer lending platform, we do not disburse the loan from our own book. We need somebody to fund the demand for the loans, which is either retail customers, individual investors who register themselves in our platform to be the lenders, or we partner with banks or institutional companies who basically have pool of funds, but they cannot disperse it to their end users or customers. So by having this kind of strategic and unique positions, we could facilitate the needs of intermediary functions. We could bring in more money from banks, and then we can distribute it to those people, customers who really need the money, but previously cannot access the money because of barrier to access, and also some complications, procedures, documentations, collaterals that typically being asked by the bank in order to disperse loan.
But Amarta will stay in Indonesia, or do you want to expand?
We have conducted some research to similar market in Southeast Asia. We see Philippines, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand as pretty much similar. They face pretty much similar challenges to Indonesia, which is financial access or financial inclusions. And we also see that micro businesses are the one who sustain their economies. So we plan to explore those markets, but then again, like previously Katharina mentioned, there are harmonization issues in terms of the regulatory environment, where financial sector is the one that usually highly regulated. Even though we are registered as a technology company, but we are operating or we are doing business in financial sectors. So basically, we need to get and to meet some certain level of compliance to the local market outside of Indonesia. Even in Indonesia itself, we have to go through various due diligence, and also we have to meet very tight requirements from the regulators just to get the license, because we are one of the earliest fintech players registered and licensed in Indonesia. So I've been through the painful and lengthy process to get the license to operate as a fintech. And when we are researching how to expand to other markets, I could sense the feeling that we will go through that kind of process again. So yes, we are willing to expand our market, but probably not opening up new companies there, but more like partnering with local entities, local banks, or even local fintech players, so that we could collaborate as an ecosystem rather than going into the market by ourselves.
All right. Tobias, you lost connection. Were you able to hear us, or? Yes. Okay, you heard everything. Now you're muted again, but I think you heard us all the time. Okay, good. Yeah, Thorsten, another question to you. Which country or region would you say is like a role model for the cooperation between fintechs and banks?
Well, that's a good one. I'd say the UK, not least because of the high number, but also the good quality of fintechs, the early start of the sector, and the very strong ecosystem they have, the great facilities, and the almost untouchable, or you can't criticize the approach of the UK regulator and the UK government. I mean, if you see that this is really a government priority, and I think it's again similar in Hong Kong when the Hong Kong government decided to make fintech one of the government priorities, and that not only meant to pour in some money into subsidizing funding schemes, maybe, but also meant changing the regulation. And I have an interesting example. I earlier mentioned Alex Kong. I mean, there are some examples where fintech companies have pushed on doors, have met the regulators, have had formal and informal talks, have really stayed on the ball, and of course the regulators, we saw, because we are inside the government, we had that inside view, let's say, in Invest Hong Kong, that regulators were quite interested at that time in Hong Kong to understand what were the needs of the fintechs. I remember we did a fintech roundtable here in Berlin in 2017 with the Hong Kong finance junior minister, and he, instead of making his speech and saying this is who we are and what we want, he asked the fintechs in the room, including N26 and FinLeap and others, what do you want from the Hong Kong? What do you expect of the Hong Kong regulation going forward? And that was very impressive for the fintech companies.
Tobias, one last question to you. As long as you have a quite local or regional approach, is internalization is it something fintech still aim, or do you really try to hold the power here in Germany?
Sorry, is this question to me because I was not on the audio? I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay,
yes.
So sorry again, the audio was off.
Okay.
And so I need to hear the question again. Sorry for that. I was
No
for the
problem.
last 2 minutes out.
No problem. I was just asking if, as far as you have a quite local or regional approach in the Founder Center, is going international, going to other countries still something fintechs is their biggest aim, or is it? Do you think also the German cooperation between banks and fintechs should be stronger, and that not everything should go in other countries?
It depends on the solution, I would guess, because there are some topics which can spread internationally, but also regionally empower the regional banks or the corporations we can set up there. And so, to be honest, for example, we have this with Raisin here. I think that's not an approach which is only for Germany, so it's good to spread it up and to see where are the markets and where it fits in. But to be highly regulated in a specific regional market is also another topic, and there are some options. And so if there's a possibility, why not jump into this and see if it works here? And then afterwards, it could be also an option to spread it. And for example, from Germany to DACH as the first step, which is usual in the scene, and then get to the European market or even international.
All right. Thank you so far. As long as we are pretty close to the end. Online, I don't see any questions, but probably here. Well, there is one. Can you help me with the microphone? Do you have one? Yeah, thank you.
Keeping seated here, so...
Oh, wait.
So now I'm on? I'm on now? Yeah,
yes,
it seems I hear myself.
So
sorry to keep seated here, but I'm a bit lazy nowadays. So one main issue for me, like fintechs, banks working together, or fintech banking in general, is the banking license. So it depends, of course, what is your business model, but like companies like N26, already mentioned here, I think that's one of the companies in Germany that has already a banking license. Simplifying here because there are different kinds of banking licenses, don't make it too complicated here. But the question is, in your business models, how important is a banking license, and how important is it then to work together with a bank just to use the banking license, of course, of the bank?
I would say Katharina would be perfect, but I'm not sure if you can answer.
And I can now talk.
All right, then go for it.
So I think indeed going straight for a banking license, especially for a newly starting business, is probably or tends to be a little bit of overkill. Again, oversimplifying a little bit, because it of course depends a bit on what business model you're in. And by now there are actually quite a few players around that have specialized in providing, let's say, the license plus infrastructure, be it in lending, be it accounts and KYC for fintech business models. So this is Solaris Bank, I think, is a known one. Then our very own Raisin Bank also does this. So I would say yes, this is fairly important and crucial, because indeed setting up for a banking license is a rather long-term project. We talked earlier about time to market. A banking license definitely prolongs that a lot more, and also just the amount of financing and personnel you need in order to be able to apply for a banking license is quite heavy. So I personally believe it's really good that we have those partnerships, because the banks that do partner up with the fintechs will still make sure that there are solid processes in place when it comes to compliance, risk management, etc., because they do lend out, so to speak, their license, so they can also support. So the fintechs can really learn from them on what the regulator looks at. And on the other hand, it allows a fintech to go to market quicker, and then down the road, you can still decide to get your own license. By the way, this is how N26 did it, right? So they actually started out without a banking license, and then when they became big enough, they said, okay, this is such a central piece of our business model. We need the license ourselves, and we need to operate this ourselves, so we're not dependent on someone else. But I think this is a bit the typical way, with the exception of, let's say, very few neobanks, which again tend to be in the UK, and they did start off with a banking license from the outset. But in Germany, and I might be mistaken, but I don't have an example that comes to mind right now that started off directly with a banking license. I'm sure there is one somewhere, but I don't have one in my mind. So the vast majority starts without.
Okay, I hope the question is, I think it's pretty much answered. Thank you so much, Katharina. Is there another question? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm completely new to fintech, so I'm coming from ground zero. Every time people talk about fintech, it's about banking and money. Nobody really talks about insurtech, which also kind of comes under fintech. So why hasn't insurtech taken off yet? I mean, there are a few startups which have been doing really well, but it's not really as sexy, I guess, as banking startups. So.
Well, I think you should have been here last year when we talked about insurtech. No, but seriously, I think probably insurtech, probably lending tech still are the lesser disrupted side of the banking business than other areas that I mentioned earlier, paid tech, where you have a lot of players, a busy, competitive situation. And I think it's all down to who owns the customer. It's all down to the customer experience. And in the lending side, dare I say this, to me, it's all down to the time to take the lending decision, and also to take the good decisions, right? To improve those decision-making processes. And if you look at, especially lending, I mean, the risk assessment is still the same that has been in 20 years ago. So you still have the underwriters, you still have people who make decisions. So that's very exciting, I think, wherever you are, to automate certain such processes. And I remember a recent loan application I had through Commerce Bank, who simply used one of those video ID providers, where you could simply identify myself as a person. So the KYC process was outsourced, was done in 5 minutes, and saved me from sitting down with a bank manager. So these are careful steps, but there's a long way to go. And yeah, I hope this gives you some insights.
Could you please take the? Thank you.
Do you think insurtech is actually more difficult for startups to get a foothold in as compared to traditional banking models? Is that why it's taking so much time to take off?
Probably not. I mean, if you look at Revolut, for example, they have their great travel insurance feature integrated. Have been doing that for a long time, and it's obviously based on your location. So if you allow the banking app, Revolut app, to access your location data, then it knows that you are not in your home jurisdiction. And let's say it's the EU countries you're traveling to. You're currently physically present with your smartphone. You pay roughly £1 a day for a pretty comprehensive travel insurance. So that's something that's already very widely available, and it's not so difficult to do.
All right, thank you. Okay, so there's 1 or 2 minutes left. I just want to have a short round talking to you for please tell us what do you expect, how the development between the cooperation between banks and fintechs will go on. What is what you expect? So, Tobias, do you want to start?
Yes, for sure. In my opinion, it is a market which will size up in the next years, because especially speaking for us as Berliner Volksbank, we are always looking for good corporations, and this is what I see in the last years, that the momentum is very high and that we include more and more partners to our system to give the customer the best possible user experience. And this is what also Thorsten mentioned before. We have the access to the customers. We want to stay in the market, and we want to be a relevant player in the market. And so we are looking for partnerships. We are looking for the right partnerships to solve real problems. And as already mentioned, if there is a problem which is solved and the bank has the possibility to give it to their customers, we will do it. And so I think when I talk to other colleagues from other banks, they are also looking to it because the platform momentum is very high. Everybody tries to aim into this, and so I think we're just in the beginning of this. And so I'm pretty happy to be in this phase, in this market, to see where we can go with it.
Yeah. Aria, also your opinion is interesting. I just have to please you all to keep it very short. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I think in the future, fintech and banks need to work together to educate the regulators, so we will not lose momentum, and so that we can serve our customers better.
Thank you. Katharina, what do you think? Where will the development go?
Yeah, so I do see that this will also, we will see more and more of this. We've seen COVID give a big push, and I expect we'll continue down that path.
Thank you. And last but not least, Thorsten.
Thank you. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a very exciting model, the banking as a service model. We will see more of this. There's also other players like again, another UK player, Raisin, who already have operations in Germany. And I think that's good news for both sides, for the non-banks, let's say the travel companies, the airlines, for the banks, but also for the fintechs. And I wouldn't do my job properly if I wouldn't mention one example from Magdeburg, where I hail from. In Magdeburg, we have a company called X Trading, and X Trading provide bond trading systems for stock exchanges, and it's one of those players you've never heard of. They are headquartered in London, development team of 50 in Magdeburg, and recently onboarded the Jakarta, Indonesia stock exchange, where they provide this service. So highly scalable, and so you have these players, and if we introduce stock exchanges as big incumbent players as well, that work with those international institutions, and this is a beautiful example, I think, of how Germany, Asia can work together.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening, for joining our panel. It was a pleasure for me, and thank you, of course, to you four as being my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.